What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we're going to be talking about a deck I'm very excited about, something I've been kind of tweaking around with for a little bit, and I think now is definitely the time for it to shine in the meta with Zan's recent results with Jafar. This deck is not Jafar, but people may think you're playing Jafar because of what's going on in the meta right now. So stick around, see what we're doing with this deck that does not need to quest at all. Before we get into that, as always, a big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. None of this would be doable without you guys, so thank you guys so much for sticking around and just continuing to support the channel and support me as a creator. I don't know how I would keep up with this without the Patreons, so thank you so much. If you want to check out the Patreon, there's a link in the description below, but without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about today's deck list. Amethyst Steel, not Jafar. First up in the 1-drop slot, and forgive me for the sleeves, I'd use my backup sleeves for this deck because I just have a lot of decks made right now. We have 4 Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line with resist 1. This is a card that I've been a huge proponent of for a long time since Steel became relevant in the meta. To me, this is one of the best 1-drops, especially if you're playing Steel, to counter those opposing Steel decks. So Mickey Mouse, don't sleep on it, especially if you're playing a deck that has potential shift lines for Mickey Mouse. This is an excellent 1-drop. Another excellent 1-drop in this deck, and something that is a major focal point of the deck, is going to be Magic Broom, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1. With whenever you play another character, you may banish this character to draw a card. So it's just going to be a great way to fill your hand with some additional cards in the early game, be able to get some options for what you're able to play. It's also nice with Broom that he can be banished in real time, so if you really need to dig immediately without questing with him, it is an option. And then we have 3 Diablo Obedient Raven, another card that I think is fantastic in the Steel matchup. It's a 1-cost inkable 0/1 stat line. When it's banished, you draw a card. In those Steel matchups, they're wanting to use their removal a lot of times. They may challenge into this because it's not going to deal any damage with them, but if they're challenging into this, even with something like a Cinderella, it's taking them a turn off of being able to sing something. Also, if they're choosing not to sing and get that additional card drop by playing something like Let the Storm Rage On, then they're just going to be tapping that guy down and opening it up to a potential challenge from another character. So Diablo Obedient Raven, great again for getting you some early game card draw, getting you those options for what your play lines are going to be. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we've got our second Magic Broom in the deck, a 2-cost inkable Magic Broom Bucket Brigade, 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line questing for 1, and when you play this character, you may shuffle a card from any discard into its player's deck. This is not something you're ever going to want to be using to target cards from your opponent's discard, short of playing against somebody who's playing Ruby Sapphire. In that matchup, that ability becomes super relevant to be able to target your opponent's discard, because you can play Magic Broom Bucket Brigade and say remove their Be Prepared when they want to take advantage of something like Maui Shark to be able to get that back to be prepared again. Or if you're not so concerned about their Be Prepared, you could get rid of really anything that's in their bin, How Far I'll Go, or even those popsicles. If you think they're going to play Automatoa and grab those back, you can force them to shuffle them back into their deck. However, what this is primarily here for is all of those other matchups, or when you don't have those targets in the Ruby Sapphire matchup, Magic Broom is going to be able to shuffle those whole new worlds back in your deck and give you an opportunity to play them in additional time, or really any card you want to get back in your deck and get another chance to use. A great card to filter in this deck, and something that we do have a kind of little combo with going on, so hear me out on this one, stick around for more on this deck list as to why I'm playing this card, is going to be Cinderella Knight in Training, a 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line questing for 1. With when you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. So if you have unfavorable uninkables in your hand that you need to get rid of, Cinderella is a fantastic way to do that. Like I mentioned, she is also a combo piece with another card in this deck. Not so great in the Steel matchup. If you can do the combo with her, still can be very good. Also in the 2-cost slot, our last character in the 2-cost slot, we have 4 Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2-cost uninkable this time, 3/2 stat line questing for 1 with resist +1. Resist is hugely relevant in a Steel meta. Anything with resist is going to be better than ever. Seen cards like Calhoun going up in price in this meta because she is just that good. And during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. So she's going to be a fantastic way in those decks where you're trying to get some aggro questing in to gain some additional lore. In this deck, it's really just about the fact that she has resist and she is a good early game challenger. You're not so much concerned about the lore game. Next up, we have another 2-cost uninkable that keep in mind, I know we've seen a few uninkables already. The uninkable count in this deck is only like 12 or 13, so it's fairly minimal. And we've got another one here, 2-cost uninkable action in Show Me More. Each player draws 3 cards, not optional, it is forced. So both players get 3 cards for only 2 ink. So if you need to dig, it can be a good way to do so. Another great way to dig while your opponent digs is going to be for Amethyst Chromacon, a 2-cost inkable item. Each player may draw a card. So your opponent doesn't have to draw a card on this one. You're probably going to be in a position where you want to if you're exerting this. You may sometimes be in a position where you just want to ink this and it's not the thing that you need to play later in the game, but in the early game, Amethyst Chromacon can be really good. And before your opponent really knows what you're doing, they're probably going to take the opportunity to draw cards for free. A card that will more clearly give away what you're trying to accomplish with this deck, so you don't want to play this until the late game, is going to be 3 Mad Hatter's Teapot, a 2-cost inkable item. And with Exert It and pay 1 ink, each opponent puts the top card of their deck into their discard. So if you get 3 of these down, you're potentially milling your opponent for 3 every single turn at the cost of only 3 ink and exerting some items. But this is, like I mentioned, a late game way to just continue to push some of those cards out of your opponent's deck after they've gone ahead and drawn a lot of their own volition. Next up, jumping over to the 3-cost slot, we have 2 Magic Broom Industrial Model, a 3-cost inkable 2/3 stat line questing for 1. With when you play this character, chosen character gains resist +1 until the start of your next turn. Like I mentioned, resist incredibly relevant in the current meta in a very steel heavy meta, in a meta where we're seeing a lot of aggro decks. Resist can still be really good because it helps you keep those guys out challenging their characters, and Magic Broom again is working into what this deck is trying to do. So being able to go like turn 2 Calhoun and being able to play turn 3 Magic Broom Industrial Model and giving it an additional +1, you now have a 3/2 Calhoun with resist 2. She's probably not dying to really anything that's on the board at that time, and she is an incredibly effective challenger with that additional resist. She's already a great challenger as it is, so that extra point of resist is really good. And even when you look at like your weaker 2-drops like the Magic Brooms and the Cinderellas that are just going to be 2/2s, not necessarily what you're looking to be playing on 2. Typically on 2 you want to be on that Amethyst Chromacon or more 1-drops, but even if you have those down and you're able to give them resist +1, potentially they're able to take a challenge without being banished. The name of the game with this deck is stalling the board. Next up, still in the 3-cost slot, we're on 4 Magic Broom, a 3-cost inkable 4/3 stat line questing for 1. With when you play this character, banish her or return another chosen character of yours to your hand, and she does have Rush, so you're going to be able to take advantage of those enter play triggers with so many of the cards that you have in this deck by playing her, bouncing it back, and playing those cards again, which is fantastic. Not to mention she is one of the best board challengers still to this point in the game. She's a great surprise against any opponent. If they're just getting ready to blast away, all of a sudden you're like Madam M. Fox, and I'm like, oh no, now I gotta deal with this. The final card in the 3-cost slot, and one I don't think most people would see coming, but is a fantastic card when played in the right combination of cards, is Fairy Godmother Pure Heart, a 3-cost inkable 3/4 stat line questing for 1. With whenever you play a character named Cinderella, you may exert chosen character. Honestly, a really solid stat line for a 3-drop, and a really good ability if you have those 2-cost Cinderellas available to you. And even if you don't, she is a potential shift target, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, with the idea of keeping your foot on the gas on turn 4 are actually our only 4-drop in the deck, and we'll explain that a little bit more. The deck has over 22 drops, and so really what you want to be doing on turn 4 is playing 2 cards that cost 2. If you don't have 2 cards that cost 2 and you have an Earth Giant is really good as a 4-cost inkable 4/5 stat line questing for 2. And when you play this character, each opponent draws a card. Mandatory, they do not get an option, they do have to draw that card. So that is, again, relevant to what this ability is, relevant to what this deck is trying to accomplish in the late game. Jumping over to the 5-cost slot and the first of our shift cards, we are on 4 Mickey Playful Sorcerer, a 5-cost inkable 3/4 stat line questing for 2, shifting for 3 with resist 1. As I mentioned, resist is incredibly relevant to the strategy here in this deck, going up against a largely steel meta. It still is definitely relevant in those non-steel matchups as well, just when it comes to your characters getting challenged. And when you play this character, deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of broom characters you have in play. As you saw, we do have 8 brooms already in this deck. I've got a couple more that I included, so it's not necessarily a super broom heavy deck, but there are potentially 10 brooms that could be on the board, so you could be getting a decent amount of damage out of Mickey Mouse Playful Sorcerer in the right situation, and we're taking advantage of some shenanigans that maybe will get those brooms back into our hands. So stick around for the kind of full picture of what this deck is trying to do. But Mickey Mouse, Playful Sorcerer is something we saw people kind of mess around with, even with decks without brooms, just for the ability to have resist and shift for an inexpensive cost. So I think this card has a ton of potential, and it's in this deck particularly, it's very good. Speaking of that last Magic Broom, this is a card that I think is pretty underrated when it comes to these matchups, and that is Magic Broom Swift Cleaner, a 5-cost uninkable 4/4 stat line questing for 2. So really solid stat line. It is uninkable, but like I mentioned, the uninkable count in this deck is fairly low to begin with, since we aren't playing a lot of the steel removal that is uninkable. We're more concerned about controlling the board with our characters because we're not needing to quest. So typically a deck, you're looking to quest to gain your lore and control the board with removal cards. We're looking to control the board with our characters. We're not concerned about questing. We can, if that becomes the alternative strategy, we can potentially try to quest for 20. It's definitely an option with this deck. We have lots of characters with decent questing stat lines, but we're not looking to do that. So these characters are really here to control the board, and then you're trying to win the game by decking your opponent. So Magic Broom Swift Cleaner, super good. You have a few Magic Brooms in the bin, you throw him down. He's a 4/4 with Rush, so he's going to potentially be a surprise challenger to your opponent to be able to deal 4 damage. And when you play this character, you may shuffle all Broom cards from your discard into your deck. So any of those Broom cards in your bin are going back in your deck, particularly if your deck is short, which is entirely possible if you played a few Whole New Worlds. It can be great to get some extra cards back in there, so you're not decking yourself out, you're just decking your opponent out. Next up in the 5-cost slot, a card I am super happy to see be able to shine in this deck, and that is going to be 4 Bagheera Guardian Jaguar, a 5-cost inkable 4/3 stat line questing for 2. So not the most earth-shattering stat line, but it is bodyguard, and it's really its ability that is going to let this card shine, and that is going to be during an opponent's turn when this character is banished, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. So it's essentially going to set off, if it's banished in any way, so it doesn't have to be in a challenge, just if it's banished during your opponent's turn, it's essentially going to set off grab your sword, but this card is inkable and a character. So I think that is super relevant, super good. Dealing 1 damage to a lot of characters. We used to play a deck called Shifty Fairy Control many sets ago that had a similar thing going on with Fairy Godmother and Cinderella and all that kind of stuff. And we played Tinkerbell in that deck, hence part of why it was a fairy deck. Blue Fairy was in it and stuff, so it had a fairy theme. Tinkerbell was really good at the time. Now, like I mentioned, with a lot of characters with resist hitting the meta, they're not going to be affected with that 1 damage, but Bagheera dealing 2 damage to everything is going to get around resist to at least put some points of damage on those characters with resist, and really kind of nuke the board potentially on those characters that don't have resist, or at least put them in a position where if they're challenging after they take that damage, it's not going to be good for them. Also with Bagheera, worth noting, you don't always have to take advantage of his bodyguard ability. You can just put him down standing up. All of a sudden your opponent has to have a direct removal card available to get rid of him or give you an opportunity to be able to sing a Whole New World. Next up in the 5-cost slot, a card I've been talking about a lot as we've gone through this deck list, and that is going to be Fairy Godmother Mystic Armor, a card I've always thought is very good, but she doesn't have a very cheap shift target, so that's prevented her from seeing a ton of meta play in my opinion. But the shift target that she does have, even the 3 cost, can be really kind of interesting, because let's pull her out here. We've got the 3-cost Fairy Godmother, and we've got the 2-cost Cinderella. So first of all, Fairy Godmother, 5-cost inkable 3/4 stat line, shifting for 2, so very cheap to shift. And when this character quests, your other characters gain Challenger +3, and when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand this turn. All your other characters will get +3 after she quests, and if they're banished while they're challenging, they're going to go back in your hand. So turn 3, you go Fairy Godmother. She has, whenever you play a character named Cinderella, you may exert chosen character. Turn 4, you play Cinderella. You get to draw and discard a card, which is neat, and also you trigger that Fairy Godmother ability to exert an opposing character. Once you do that, you go ahead and shift your Fairy Godmother on, like I mentioned, this on turn 4. So turn 4 Cinderella, then you shift your Fairy Godmother, cost 2. And then you quest with her, and now all of a sudden any of the characters that you were able to get down on the board, like those Mickey Mouses for instance, are fantastic. The 1-cost Mickey Mouse on turn 1 and 2 are all going to get Challenger +3, and if they're banished in a challenge, they go back to your hand. So you're potentially talking about characters challenging for 4 or 5 at that point, banishing your opponent's opposing characters. Even if they have a character that just came down that wasn't exerted yet, you're able to exert it with the small Fairy Godmother's ability. So you're potentially able to exert your opponent's entire board, challenge it out, or challenge most of it out with the characters that you have, bounce your characters back to your hand, and then you're ready to go again in the subsequent turns. It's entirely likely that Fairy Godmother could die at that point to direct removal, but that's a risk that you're just going to have to take. She's really there to be an explosive threat one time, or to be a potential option for singing when that is relevant, because like I mentioned, this deck is playing for A Whole New World, a 5-cost uninkable action song in the last card in the deck. Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. The cool thing about A Whole New World in the meta right now, and I touched on this a little bit at the beginning with Jafar, is that when you sing A Whole New World, people are immediately going to think, oh, they're playing a Jafar deck. You're not playing a Jafar deck, so they may be sitting and holding on to their bigger removal spells for when that Jafar hits the board to be able to deal with him, and it's Jafar that's never coming. So you get an opportunity, just Whole New World, Whole New World, Whole New World. Opponents are going to be drawing a lot of cards. You're seeing many instances where people over the course of the game are drawing 20 to 30 cards in addition to the cards that they're drawing for their turn and the cards that they draw at the beginning of the game. So you're talking about really only, in a lot of instances, having to deck your opponent for 20 to 30 cards total. That can be achieved in a few Whole New Worlds and a few Show Me Mores. Then you get those Mad Hatter Teapots in the mix and those Earth Giants forcing your opponent to draw. You can actually make them lose during your turn. So say, for instance, you deck them down to the point where they have 0 cards left, but they haven't had to draw yet, and then you're going to pass turn. They're going to lose, but you could do something funny, like play an Earth Giant and force them to draw, and they actually lose the game during your turn because they have to draw on that draw trigger, and they can't. So the deck is a lot of fun. It's being able to play something that is going to be milling your opponent and doing something different in the Lorcana space is always a good time. I think playing a lot of off-meta cards that your opponent has to read is always something that I like to do, and especially when they're effective together, it just really makes it a great time. So try the deck out. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below if there's a card you think I should definitely be playing that I'm not, or a card that you think that I need to remove. Please let me know. And as always, when you see those toys, video games, and Whole New Worlds getting rid of all your opponent's cards off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.